Sean vive, la lucha sigue. Sean vive, la lucha sigue. Sean vive, la lucha sigue. Let me hear you. Sean vive, la lucha sigue. La lucha sigue. Sean vive, la lucha sigue. Sean vive, la lucha sigue. Gracias, thank you, my Tusha way.
But if all you're doing is legislation, then what we got last year was 2 common sense bills. Nothing that was even threatening. A police decertification bill we were co-sponsoring that got killed in the legislature, and a pilot program called the Crises Act for people having mental health breakdowns to have an alternative to the police. And the governor vetoed it. At the same time that they were wagging their finger at other parts of the country and saying justice for George Floyd, they had an opportunity to address police terrorism right here in California, and they denied it. Those are the gangsters. Those are the terrorists. So, in closing, I'll say, beware the 4 Ps. Police, prisons, probation, prosecutors, defund them all. When I say defund, y'all say police. Defund! Police! Defund! Police! Defund! Police! Fuck the police every day.
Fuck the police coming straight from the underground. Oh, y'all want me to go there? Alright, hey, okay, now, I want you all to do you look at this, the purple bracelet that we all have on? I want to tell you that I paid close attention to signs and symbols. You see, purple is a sign of royalty. And Sean Monterrosa was a prince amongst men. He stood up for the oppressed people. Remember, he was protesting and advocating and just lifting up and saying that we need justice for George Floyd, okay? I want you just to recognize the context of how he was murdered and executed. He was murdered and executed in the midst of doing something righteous, not something wrong. He was standing for righteousness. And that's what we're doing. We're standing for righteousness. And I want to tell you about another organization.
But let me tell you something. Justice would be Sean being alive today.
That's right.
And, you know, Grassroots Law Project, we are an organization that advocates for racial justice and civil rights and the end to mass incarceration. And while I take pride in the work that we do, I wish we didn't have to continue doing this every so often. Right? I wish we didn't have to keep coming out, showing up, and saying their names. I wish we could see our people live to see another day.
Right.
And, you know, something I think about, and I'm really tired of hearing it, is the argument, well, not all police are bad, right? There's just a few bad apples, but the way I see it, if the good apples aren't doing anything about the bad apples, then all the apples are bad, and they're all right.
That's right. We agree.
And I think it's time, like has been previously said, we really think about an entirely different system and dismantling the one that we have. The Grassroots Law Project was founded by Lee Merritt and Sean King, and something that Sean says often is, you know, the system is not broken, it's working as it was intended to work. And that is a system that we can't continue to have. And, you know, the last thing I'll say here is, when I was growing up, my favorite subject in school was always history. And I used to I read the lessons and you would learn about the civil rights movement. And I used to always have so much appreciation and respect for those who stood for civil rights previously. And I would think to myself, where would I have been if I was around back then? But when you look around and police are killing our people with no accountability, you realize you're living in another civil rights movement. And I just want to encourage everyone here to continue to stand up, to show up, and to speak up, because we're living in a movement, not a moment, and we cannot be silent. We have to continue to fight, stand for justice, and bring the change that we need. So I want to thank all of you for being here.
Hi guys, my name is Kim Youngblood, and I also work with the Grassroots Law Project. I am one of the senior organizers and the family coordinator. So I have the honor and the privilege of getting to know some of these impacted families. And from the moment that I was introduced to the Monterrosa sisters, they were bigger than life. They were doing so much work, and I've been doing organizing for 3 years. And to watch these young ladies move the way that they move, so fearlessly, so courageously, I want you guys to continue to envelop them in your arms and support them, because there's a lot of things, aside from losing their brother, there's a lot of things that they've sacrificed in this fight. And I want you guys to recognize that. When they have events, when they need things, please envelop them, surround them. They are leading this fight for their family. They're doing this for Sean and other impacted families. So I've met families like Oscar Grant family, the Monterrosa family, the Tatiana Jefferson family. I've worked with all of them, Jamil Roberson. But it's something about these girls. Every time I talk to them, it's something about Ashley and Michelle. I love them. I love them so much. They're like baby sisters to me. So I appreciate you guys showing up and showing out in the way that you did. And we at Grassroots Law support all impacted families, but what we really do advocate for is police change, systemic change across the country. So it's not just holding events, and it's not just holding rallies. These elections do matter. So hold your electeds accountable. We are fighting for justice and accountability, and we are fighting that Officer Jared Ton is arrested and that the Vallejo PD is investigated. I am grateful for the privilege of being a part of Grassroots Law, and for Sean King and me, Mary, who's the co-founder, seeing in me that I was someone that can actually play this role for these families, because it is not easy. It's not easy to listen to what they're going through, and I'm dealing with multiple families. So this event, this opportunity to see the Monterrosas, it's an honor and a privilege to be in your presence, and I am forever and always with you. So thank you guys so much.
Qué grande que es Dios. Si mi Sean los estuviera viendo a todos aquí, sé que estaría feliz. Qué bueno que es que ustedes se levanten, porque sin acción no hay victoria. Qué bueno que estemos todas las razas unidas, que eso es lo más hermoso. Todas las lenguas, porque no hace falta a veces perfeccionar el idioma, aunque uno lo hable poquito o no sepa un vocabulario tan extenso. Pero el amor lo hace todo, lo logra todo y lo cubre todo. Así que los aliento a cada uno de ustedes, los que tienen niños pequeños, de ir formándoles con esa semilla tan hermosa que es de vernos todos iguales. No importa la raza, no importa el estatus social, no importa el bolsillo, no importa la casa, el auto, eso es pasajero, eso es terrenal, es un tiempo, pero lo más hermoso es lo que llevamos dentro de nuestro ser, dentro de nuestra alma. Eso nadie lo puede quitar. Nos pueden quitar la vida, pero los valores nadie nos puede quitar. El estudio nadie lo puede quitar. El conocimiento son cosas que quedan y que dejamos como legado a otras personas, los que vienen detrás de nosotros. Les amo y les doy un abrazo grande a todos y miles de besos de parte mía y de parte de mi Sean. Gracias por estar aquí.
I'm humbled and honored to be here to stand in solidarity with the Monterrosa family and all the families whose loved ones have been stolen by police terrorism. And I want to piggyback on a few points. One is similar to my brother Malik. I'm a proud co-founder of a movement called All of Us or None. It's a movement of formerly incarcerated people for us, by us. It's actually started right here in the Sucker Free, y'all. I was born and raised here in San Francisco, pre-gentrification. My roots in San Francisco go back 3 generations. My grandpa came down to Sucker Free in the 30s. Had a house right there on 22nd and South Van Ness, then by Glen Park. My family grew up, lived on Page Street, 1921 Page Street in the Lower Panhandle, and also in the Outer Mission. So we bounced around, but through and through, Sucker Free City, right? So I want to say a few things because I want to piggyback on some points my sister Morningstar and others have made today. One is, if you're a formerly incarcerated person, raise your hand, or a family member of a formerly incarcerated person. So one thing we need to recognize as formerly incarcerated people and as family members is that we are survivors of state terrorism. I don't know anybody who's been locked up that hasn't experienced state violence. I experienced it for the first time at Herbert Hoover Middle School right here in San Francisco at the age of 12. I got into a fist fight, had a little disagreement with another classmate. We took it down to West Portal Park to the tennis courts. We threw elbows. It was all good. It happens. It's part of growing up, right? Right. The very next day, me and that other student got pulled into the vice principal's office. And there was a police officer there. And the police officer began to press up on us, all that other stuff, right? So they tried to label it a gang-related incident because there was 2 young men of color involved. And I remember at that time, you know, I'd been the token poor brown kid in a little program out here as a magnet program to try to address the white flight here in San Francisco called Gifted and Talented Education. So I was in the fucking GATE program, y'all. Excuse my language. I was in the GATE program. Just being surrounded by these kids with privilege in the GATE program. Somehow I thought because of that proximity, they taught us we had fundamental rights and things like that. The officer was physically threatening me. And I thought, oh man, this fool's tripping, I got rights. And I laughed. And the SFPD officer punched me in the face. I was 12 years old. I looked at the vice principal, Mr. Arata, an old white man, and he looked outside the window as if he didn't see anything. And I got the message. That was my first incident, and I had numerous incidents after that. All the way to the time that I was 17 and I was incarcerated facing multiple felonies and abused inside by the people that in juvenile detention, you know, they call the dogs, they call security, they call them counselors. Hey, counselors, they're pigs. Just like the pigs out here in the street terrorizing black and brown communities. So I say that much because I think it's really important that we don't silo these issues. These movements, they're inextricably connected. And the other thing that's inextricably connected is black and brown solidarity. You cannot talk about police terrorism without talking about black and brown solidarity. That's right. Why? Because the very first prisons in the context of the United States were what? The slave plantation and the reservation. If you were an enslaved person of African descent and you stepped off the slave plantation, you would be hunted, you would be brutalized, and you would be possibly murdered. If you were an indigenous person relegated to the reservation and you stepped off the res, you would be hunted, you would be brutalized, and you would be possibly murdered. So the roots of policing in this country are what? The slave patrols and the cavalry. And so for those who scratch their heads and say, well, what about Latinx? Well, what the hell is a Latinx, y'all? That's erasure of indigenous and African identities. Because Latin America and the Caribbean, 90% of the Spanish-speaking world is made up of people of African and indigenous descent. It's not a racial identity. It's a cultural and ethnic identity. Yes. So let's get it right. What we really mean when we talk about black and brown solidarity. And if that's the roots of policing and prisons, then miss me with that reform bullshit. Fuck reform. We want to transform. So I'm gonna say something else that may not be popular, and I know that, but it needs to be said.